and welcome to the first episode of LOL Lounge, a podcast brought to you by YGG Play, the publishing arm of Yield Guild Games. I'm Leah Callon-Butler, and I'm going to be your host for today. I think a lot of people know YGG as the OG community in Web3 gaming, but behind the scenes, they've also backed and partnered with like a ton of games over the years. And it's this experience that led them into game publishing and also what inspired this podcast. The idea was to create a platform for discussions about what it actually takes to launch, publish, scale, and sustain Web3 games today. Over the course of the series, we're going to cover game design, monetization, tokenomics, community building, distribution, retention, the full stack. And while we'll cover a range of projects, we're especially interested in the largely untapped market opportunity around casual degen games. In the coming weeks, we're even going to have IRL recordings at CoinFest Asia, Korea Blockchain Week, Token 2049, and of course, the YGG Play Summit in Manila, Philippines this November. But for this episode, we got Gabby of YGG, Dith of Gigaverse, and Mason from Abstract for a chat about game publishing and how the business is being reimagined in the decentralized era. Guys, welcome to the first episode of LOL Lounge.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so Gabby, a lot of people have heard your origin story before, but maybe not through the lens of a game publisher. And YGG Play, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but like it feels like a full circle moment for you. Can you just walk us through your background in terms of game development and publishing specifically, and how that led to where we are now?
Yeah, so I've been a game developer for over 20 years. I've made games on PC, on mobile free-to-play. I've worked with different publishers there, good, bad, ugly, like I've seen it all. And it's really that experience being a developer working with game publishers that have really shaped how we want it to be so much better being a Web3 game publisher. With a Web2 publishing deal, for example, typically your publisher almost always owns the IP. They get the revenue directly, they own the users directly, and you just get kind of a royalty check if you make back development costs. And that's something that, we didn't want to see in Web3. In Web3, we wanted to see our developer partners making money, independent, owning their own IP, but still being able to take advantage of our experience at YDG, building community, scaling a user base, and the monetization that we've learned from Lowland so far apply to the other casual Legion games that we work with. So we really want to make a case study for how we can make Web3 game publishing equitable for both developer and publisher.
All right, so Dith, over to you, just like quick introductions. I think most listeners will know you as the founder of Gigaverse, a game on Abstract that is absolutely killing it in terms of revenue and growth. But in a past life, you were working in Stripe, right? And I think it was actually the experience in payments that got you into crypto when you got super frustrated about the inefficiency of TradFi. So, do you want to share a little bit more about how you went from fintech to full-on degen?
Yeah, so I spent most of my life in and around startups. I built a few Web2 startups, really, since coming out of college. And then over COVID, I was in between startups. I'd exited the previous one and was like kind of looking for an experience at a much later stage of growth where I could learn how what does a great late growth stage startup look like from the inside. And that's how I ended up joining Stripe. And I joined the London office at a period of hyper growth. I was the 50th person to join, and within like a year, we were up to 250. The great thing about joining Stripe is they give you a mini payments MBA. When you join the company, they hire a lot of people who don't come from a payments background, and they teach you what you need to know about payments. And honestly, it must have been in the first month that I was pretty crypto built, understanding how TradFi payments work. And I was just like, this is like, Stripe has obviously built incredible products, but this entire system is very bloated and super inefficient. And there's like an unnecessary amount of like middlemen here. So it was at that point that, sort of 2020, started spending a lot more time reading about crypto, started getting some skin in the game. Things really kind of took off for me in 2021 with NFTs. That's what I found most fun. NFTs have always had like a strong overlap with Web3 gaming. It kind of become like the vehicle or like the asset that works alongside the game. So that's what pulled me in, down the rabbit hole. And I started like helping friends launch collections or giving advice here and there. And eventually that led me to leave Stripe and make the move into crypto full time. And then the way Gigaverse came about was really as a result of, with my co-founder, who's a friend, and we were like kind of just as a passion project first and foremost, deciding to like build a game of our own and release it without expectations. But yeah, things went incredibly well, and when we launched the game, there was kind of a strong response. There was immediate traction, and that led us to leave our jobs. And so yeah, we've been working on Gigaverse full time ever since.
What was that like though? I mean, you just like got up and left your job. Like, were you nervous? I mean, like Web3 is kind of risky as much as potential and promise. It kind of serves up for a lot of people. A lot of people get wrecked. So, how did you feel at that time?
I mean, I caught the entrepreneurship bug super early, so um, taking on that risk is it's a familiar feeling for me. I will say, the job I was working, I was at a Andreessen-backed blockchain gaming studio called Proof of Play, and really enjoyed that role. It's a great team. But that was the pull that I felt about Gigaverse. I was like, well, this opportunity is like, you cannot seize this moment. I can see where this can potentially go. There's a genuine community here. I'm having a ton of fun. So I just need to do this. And I think, once that entrepreneurial sort of bug or seed is planted in your brain, it always feels more risky not to take that shot.
So, Gigaverse specifically, though, I mean, the game is like super nostalgic. I'd love to understand like what your motivation was there in terms of the design of the game, the aesthetic, because I love it when these kind of old school memories are brought into this new context of Web3. How were you thinking about that?
There's this meme in crypto where I just want to feel something, right? As the saying goes. So it's kind of that. Like, we wanted people to come into the game and immediately feel something, like a throwback to the golden era of gaming, or the kind of games that they would play growing up in their childhood. And there's also a smart design decision on our behalf because of the art style of the game. It allows us to move very, very quickly. So it was a very intentional choice that we made. Yeah, and I think the last thing I would say there is, we wanted to create within the game this like juxtaposition where you come in and it's kind of old world dungeon,
Mm.
but very futuristic like technology within. There's like teleportation devices and there's like holograms and stuff. And so in a very organic manner, we started defining what the IP and the like look and feel of the game world would be like. And the thing that's so funny is I've been in environments where teams try to do this in a very scientific manner. And there's a lot of like conceptualizing and business planning and the rest. And truth be told, we kind of winged it. We were just like a bunch of guys hanging out in Discord having fun. But I think as a culmination of our experience and a shared vision, it all feels very well put together. The truth is, though, like, this was completely organic in the way that we like define the look and feel of the world.
This is a discussion about game publishing, right? And how much we need it in Web3. And a big announcement over the last week was that Gigaverse was partnering with YGG Play and Lowland to take the next step with the game. Really wanted to have a chat about the IP collaboration between you two, because we've got the Gigaland board in Lowland and on YGG Play. We've also got Lowland skins in Gigaverse. So tell me a little bit about how that came about. Like, how did you guys even come up with the idea to do this kind of like cross-game IP collab?
Yeah, we got introduced to each other as we were uh, building out YDG Play, and immediately we just got to jamming on what kind of collab we would do together. I think really the most fun part about Web3 are the cross IP collabs, but it's not just what happens in front, it's what happens in the back as well. Of course, in front, you have what you see there. You have the Gigaland board, you have the Becta Junior NFT that you have to mint. And then on the Gigaverse side, you have the Lola loot box that you can purchase as well. But on the back end, you also have purchases that are being paid to each other via smart contracts, and yeah, that this is just not something that typically happens easily in Web 2 because you have to deal with accountants and invoices and accounts receivable and following up. So just having the ability to do a cross IP collab and then just get paid very quickly on both ends, I think is super cool.
Yeah, same point of view here. Like, there's a great opportunity to we think about introducing one another's communities to one another. It kind of anchors. There's like this anchor of familiarity, right? Where um, within the game you're already playing, you get to meet and interact with our partner's IP, and that's kind of like a way to uh, bridge the gap there and create some like immediate kind of in-app context for them to like interact with partner IP, and then and then act as a segue, obviously, to try either Lowland or Gigaverse, depending which way that they're going. This seemed like a no-brainer. Um, the other thing I would say is like it's crazy that in 2025 we just haven't seen this really done a lot, especially not in the programmatic way that we're approaching it. Um, like it seemed to me like this is what blockchain was always meant to be about and serve. So it's just kind of like high time that we do these cool things.
Yeah, do you want to just like explain a little bit what you meant by the programmatic approach? Because that is kind of unusual. So I think a lot of people might not immediately understand what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think this is actually part of Gabby's ethos and approach with YGG Play. So maybe I'll give the floor to you.
Yeah, so when we do the partnership with a developer, we want to make sure that like not only is the uh like we're gaining audience, but the value flows both ways. So which means that it's very easy to pay the developer from whatever happens in our game and vice versa. And I think yeah, it's very clear that both parties can benefit. And as I said earlier in Web 2, the publisher used to collect all of the money from the audience, build all of the user base, and then after some time remit some of that money back to the developer. And here we actually have cross audience pollination and money flowing both ways immediately, which I think is really, really cool to see. And still something very underappreciated. But yeah, that's what blockchain technology and smart contracts are for.
But Dith, I mean, Gigaverse is already super successful. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but within 3 months of launch, you guys reported $6 million in annualized revenue. You did it without any external funding, even traditional marketing spend. So, like, can we just get to the chase? And, like, if you're so successful on your own, why do you even need a publishing partner?
So the first few months have just been really awesome. We my co-founder and I, we launched the game, and really we didn't set any expectations around it. We built a game that like we ourselves first and foremost love and want to play. But the reception that we saw on abstracts was incredible. Like the traction was immediate. And it actually went so well that a few weeks after the launch, both my co-founder and I, we were working other jobs at the time. We quit those jobs and decided to focus full time on Gigaverse. And so it's been a ton of fun. and the traction has only increased since. But as we're now running, it went from sort of a passion project to a proper startup, and we started getting a bit more serious and setting proper goals. Coming back to your question, that's why it makes a lot of sense for us to think about future stages of growth. We think it's awesome what we've achieved so far. It's been fully organic, but we see a massive opportunity for Gigaverse, and it's just about capitalizing on that. And so the question is, how do we do that? And who are the best partners to do it with? And, I think like a traditional publisher would never have made any sense. But when it's Gabby and YGG, and they've kind of flipped the model on its head and are taking like a brand new approach, it actually makes a lot of sense. Like we see all the upside and none of the downside. And our goal is to be, we want to build an absolute top game that's always growing and always reaching new audiences. So, we feel that, this was a no-brainer for us in terms of continuing our growth.
I guess though, like, not every game is an instant hit like Gigaverse. I imagine there's a lot of games that like could have been absolutely amazing, but the team behind it, they're spreading themselves too thin. I think we've seen so much of that in Web3. They can't focus on what they do best, which is like building a great game, because they're trying to do all the things. Like, Gabby, I mean, over the last, what is it now, like 5 years, how many game studios in Web3 do you think fit that description?
Oh, dozens, hundreds. Yeah, a lot.
What have you seen out there, and like, how does publishing actually solve this problem?
Okay, so let's go back to 2021. A lot of games got started after the rise of Axie Infinity. I remember 21 because I've been in the game industry for a long time before moving to Web3. And most of my contemporaries, people in mobile games, free-to-play games, didn't believe that Web3 games were a real thing. They really didn't think it was a serious thing. That changed after Axie. And if you remember Axie at that time, it had pretty simple graphics, relatively simple gameplay, an amazing community. And after all that crazy success, a lot of professional game developers took a look at the game and say, hey, I can probably make a game better than that. And they came in, they raised money, they started making games. And honestly, a lot of those people actually failed because they didn't get what it meant to be a Web3 native game. So we've seen a lot of money raised since 21, a lot of attempts at games being made. And honestly, a lot of them are also high quality games with good gameplay. But for one reason or another, a lot of these games haven't captured what it means to be a Web3 native game. Of course, you have assets, you have tokenomics, you have financialization, and you have a community that probably has a much stronger voice than in your free-to-play game. So for some reason, a lot of these developers who are already very experienced in game development kind of never got it. And the funny thing is, I saw a lot of first-time game developers get it right. Coming from fintech, if you see the Axie guys, they were new to games, but they kind of embraced what was really like unique about Web3, and I think that's what made them really successful. And that's part of what we hope to bring when we say Web3 native game publishing. I've been part of a lot of publishing deals when I was a game developer working with a Web2 publisher. And typically, the game publisher, they own all of the monetization, they own all of the customers, they give you milestones in which to finish the product, and they pay you after milestone. And then you may or may not get paid royalties down the line. And like I really hated that model. There was a lot of misalignment of incentives between developer and publisher. And I said, when we do publishing, we want it to be absolutely aligned between developer and publisher.
So can I like jump in there? And this is a question for you, Gabby, and Dith too. you mentioned the sort of Axie-mania of 2020 to 2021. And I think back then, like the early rhetoric for Web3 gaming was like super anti-publisher because all these people had such terrible experiences and, they wanted to kind of DIY this new industry. But then you had all these Web3 developers and studios like literally DIY and spreading themselves too thin. So I feel like this is kind of a full circle moment has realized that we do actually need the support of publishers, but maybe it just needs to be a new model. So like what is the new model? What are you experimenting with? Like what can Web3 do that Web2 couldn't do in publishing?
So back in 21, I actually didn't think that publishing made sense. It was because everyone could raise money from BC very easily. And if you raised money from BC, you didn't have to give up any revenue. And if it succeeded, then great, right? And tokens were doing well. So it made sense. Now that we've proven that it's number one, hard to publish a game. Two, it's hard to actually have a token for a game. Then publishing matters again because execution absolutely matters. And you can see that like the successes are few and far in between, which means that, yeah, you actually have to execute properly for a successful game to work.
Yeah, I think to kind of add to that, we've seen we've seen like the 21 playbook was basically like everyone had stimulus checks and nowhere to go but online, right? So like there was so much money getting injected into the system where like now you can't have your investors, aka your token holders, and your users be the same people. You need to have like different groups, because like the consumers should be bringing the money in, then the investors are seeing the upside from that. But when you're asking somebody that's expecting upside from an investment to also spend money, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, Mason, I want to hear more from you on this. It's like, in terms of this new reality, if you've got YGG Play, the publisher, choosing to launch on Abstract, their first game, Lowland, is on Abstract, Gigaverse is on Abstract. Like, how do you see the chain feeding into this new reality in terms of like decentralizing publishing?
Yeah, I mean, I just think we're like super aligned in the fact that like we want to go out and we want to bring in, a new top of funnel with new users that aren't just there to buy your token and hope that the price goes up, right? Like they actually enjoy the game, they want to come in, they want to spend. Like, the hyper degen are hyper casual like degen games like Lowland, right? Where it's you can go in, you can spend time, you can click through things, you just enjoy. But like those users also probably aren't the ones that are like, I'm making an investment in YGG, right? Like these are it's fresh capital, so that actually creates a real flywheel.
I think there's more here though, right? Like, I mean, I'm between the three of you, like I'm seeing this really deep ecosystem play. And like I'm interested to dig into that a little bit more because I feel like the word ecosystem is overused in Web3 the same way that community is. But like what's the end game? Like what's the ultimate vision? As more games come in and work with YGG Play, as more dApps come in and build an abstract, like what's the ultimate vision here?
Abstract angle, it's creating a real economy, right? Like where there's actually that entirety of the flywheel. There's games to play, there's fresh users coming in, there's investors on the back end, right? Like that's what I think of when I think of ecosystem, not just a bunch of apps fighting over the same, 12 users. But to add a little bit of context as to why I'm thinking about the ecosystem in that way, I come from a traditional background. So spent several years at Deutsche Bank, working in emerging market rates and municipal bonds, worked at a hedge fund in New York, trading long, short, mid to large cap tech and some regional bank stuff. And I've evaluated a ton of businesses just throughout my career. So I really think about this much more from a traditional perspective, which I think is lacking in the broader crypto industry as a whole.
Yeah, what's been very interesting to me since we launched our game on Abstract is that if you think of Abstract, it's both a blockchain and a Web3 native app store, right? And there's a lot of gaming chains out there. There's, I think, like close to 100. The interesting thing I noticed about being on Abstract on the App Store was that, like, that app store platform works when they feature you, and it actually results with a lot of new users. I don't think that happens for every chain you've been on, but we actually got on the Spotlight feature last month, and there's just a flood of new users coming in, and that's when you know your app store works.
It's interesting that you mentioned the App Store though, because like I actually wanted to touch on that because I think in Web 2, like when you talk about ecosystems, we understood them to be walled gardens. That's how you create a moat. That's how you create value. That's how you create retention and stickiness. Like, how do you see the ecosystem taking shape if it's actually going to stay true to our industry's ethos of openness and permissionlessness?
Yeah, I think that's why we kind of split the two things, right? So there's abstract chain itself, and that's fully decentralized. Anyone can come build on it, can come do whatever you want to do. But then there's the abstract portal. So this is where like we are curating much harder, right? Like we want when people land on that portal, like I need them to click into fully completed games and apps that they can actually enjoy, not just clicking into some like vibe coded thing that like they're like, where am I, right? So, like, that's kinda why we made the delineation between the 2 and have made, like, steps in our marketing and kind of, like, branding to do that.
I mean, Dith, Gabby, how do you guys see this? Because again, like, if you just, everyone wants to be the Steam of Web3, like, caught that model directly, like, it doesn't work.
I see a lot of chains have, like, if you ask them, like, what's their edge or who they're building for, what they're trying to accomplish, you get some, like, really long, pontificating. You see this, like, very, pontificated sort of, unclear thing, or it's just, it's like a spaghetti of buzzwords. Um, the difference with Abstract, when we met them, it was like November, December last year, was they laid out this vision from the beginning. Like, hey, actually, we believe in distribution and we want to put apps in front of users. We think that's what builders care about. And I was like, yeah, that's literally the only thing that really matters. Assuming that, assuming like tech and whatever is there, then the only edge that really matters is like, yeah, we want to get in front of users. And we saw that materialize like from the get-go, really. The portal was live as soon as Abstract was. We launched early. I think we were on the portal. I think we were spotlit like the week that we launched, actually. And then the same thing goes with YGG's approach, right? If you distill away all the other sort of things and fluff that you will sometimes hear from certain partners or publishers, what Gabby said was the exact same thing. We just want to bring you more users, man. I was like, all right, so that's the commonality for us as Gigaverse. We just see like very sort of no bullshit, very pragmatic and focused sort of value props, both from Abstract and from YGG Play.
Coming from a perspective of someone who had been a mobile game developer on app stores, what's very refreshing is how the app store take on Web3 is done. So for your information, there's no take from on the abstract side on in-app purchases. Obviously, there's like 30% take when you're an Apple and Google. And if you're a mobile game developer, not only are you getting 70 cents for your dollar, you have to reinvest those dollars in user acquisition, Facebook, Google. So mobile game development is definitely a scale game, but it's also become a low margin business. In Web3, I make the game on my website. It's good quality enough to be on the abstract portal. Users come in, they spend money, I get 100% of it. And yeah, and like the money goes to my multisig wallet, and I actually can reinvest it on marketing or development this same second I receive it. So I can't tell you enough how refreshing that is coming from a Web2 mindset. Obviously, Abstract has their own business model. They have to make money. I believe they make money from swaps and transactions, but I can let Mason talk more about that. But from a game developer where you're not feeling like 30, 40, 50 cents of every dollar is being squeezed by the platform you're working on, it's absolutely refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, we make it kind of on the user side. So on-chain transactions, we get sequencer fees, hundreds of a cent per transaction. And we've done, I think, 110 million transactions since launch. So pretty good there. And then, yeah, we do like swaps and trading, is where we make a lot, or make a lot of our profit margins as well.
I want to poke you guys a bit on this because, like, I think Web3 has a tendency to talk about itself being the solution to all of Web2's problems, though. But actually, like, from a business model perspective, there's a lot of new challenges to navigate. Like, for one, for example, I think switching costs for users in Web3 are super low, if nothing. So driving retention and creating stickiness can be a lot harder, and you have to kind of rethink how you're actually going to drive that behavior. So from your perspective, like, what are some of the major trade-offs of building in Web3 that you've had to grapple with? Like, how are you addressing those?
I can get started in this. I guess the biggest difference between building for Web 2 and Web 3 is that in Web 2, you are like the scale is there for you to build into, where you can get to 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, even a billion users kind of somewhat easily. It's not as easy in Web3, definitely. I don't think we're looking at kind of the same mass user base. However, the biggest difference is that your average revenue per user is actually much higher on the Web3 side. So even if, for example, your app maybe at 1% of the users you have, if you had a comparable mobile game, you might be at like 100x of the average revenue per user. So like that's crazy. Like I don't actually have to go out and get 10 million users to make a few $1 million a month, for example. Like that's really crazy. And I think the thing that we've turned over our heads, like both with Gigaverse and with Lowland, is that like people can just enjoy these games, and obviously there's a chance to have crypto rewards to earn in these games, but people aren't playing it because they think they're going to become millionaires from it, right? Like, yeah, they're actually enjoying actual crypto applications.
It's true. I've seen research like that where they pointed out that the crypto market is a lot smaller, but the spend is much higher. I think there's quite a lot of reports that have backed that up. Yeah.
I think the trade-off is, I mean, honestly, we don't feel this trade-off. Like we knew exactly who we were building for and which partners we wanted to team up with, and we've been very, very intentional. But I would say the team and I are like we know this ecosystem well, and we know the user type we're building for. I think games who come into Web3 and want to like raise from or sell stuff to this user base, but then build for the classic sort of like normie gamer type persona, they run into problems because like they get a reality check on like what managing a Web3 native community,
Massive alignment problems, right?
massive alignment problems. But I would say, yeah, thanks to like, yeah, just experience and the way we design from the ground up, we don't feel there's a trade-off. Like we're very, very happy with the decisions we've made so far.
It's super interesting, this point on, Web 2 people coming in with, a lot of times, even last cycle, right, outside of gaming, we saw a lot of Web 2 people come in thinking that they were, I don't know, smarter than the average Web 3 person, or that they were going to extract money from the ecosystem. And it's just so easy to sniff out when like a Web 2 person comes in and thinks that they're smarter than everybody. It's like, you just immediately know on calls, right? So I think that's also like I want to see Web 2 talent come in, but I want to see them do it in the right way, right? So like this is another reason like we're very focused on building an economy with cash flow businesses, because nobody's leaving Web 2 to come to a business that's not cash flowing, right? Because that's like a 4 or 5 month escapade before you need to figure out how to go back to Web 2 to like actually sustain your income. But that's why I think, something like YGG doing publishing is so massive, right? Because these Web 2 teams can come in and actually hear from a voice that's in the Web 3 space and get really quality feedback on how to not come off like that when you're trying to like launch a product. So really excited about that.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because, like, this idea of cash flow revenue is pretty normal to most people in business, but it's kind of new to Web3. The revenue matter. Like a lot of early Web3 games, they just chase hype, token prices, like user metrics, which were probably inflated. But the focus has shifted now to cash flow, as you say, and sustainable revenue. But also things like, gameplay quality, long-term value creation. So 2 questions for you. What's driving the shift, other than the obvious? And also, at an impending bull run, do you think it's at risk of switching back?
I don't think it's at risk of switching back. I think that probably from this cycle on, capital will be kind of king because a lot of people coming in this cycle, it's all about TradFi, right? So it's all traditional finance and people that understand regular business coming into the space, and they're not going to, yeah, they're not going, cash flowing businesses. Like they can't underwrite something that's not cash flowing, so they're not going to invest it. Money's not going to be checked into it. So if you want any serious liquidity into your tokens or into your company, like you're going to need to fit that traditional cash flow model, right? Like you almost never see companies IPO in traditional markets without cash flow. And crypto, you see one like every 2 days, right? It's like that's gonna just have to change. So
Yeah, 21 really distorted the incentives for building something because if you can create really good trailers, have a lot of hype, strong community, and have a strong mint, it honestly propelled tokens to billions of dollars, right? So why chase cash flow? And obviously that all came crashing down in the last couple of years, and not everyone has been able to adjust. So I think how people adjust to that to cash flow while still maintaining like what is unique about Web3, I think that's where you'll see some of the best players stand out.
Dith, I feel like you wanted to jump in there.
I agree with the boys. Like, if you look at where this new type of incremental buyer is coming from and their mentality, they're very rooted in looking at fundamentals. I would also say that there's only ever going to be more and more and more tokens. So breaking through, capturing attention, standing out, is harder than it was in any previous cycle. Like we still have those dino coins from the 2017, 2020 era are capturing a bid. They're still listed on exchanges. They still get flows. So for anything new to break through at this point, it's just going to be bloody good. I mean, sure, you may have like the odd sort of, flavor of the week thing, but if you're building an on-chain ecosystem, you have assets that see continuous growth for months and months, then yeah, fundamentally it has to be, there's something there. I mean, this is what we're seeing right now with like with Rex, with some of the other sort of like popular revenue meta coins. So I think this is I think soon we'll consider this no longer a meta, and it's just like it is what it is, and everyone needs to be thinking like this.
it's not a meta in the real world. It's just traditional business standards.
Yes.
Traditional business, yeah. Dith, though, like follow-up question for you. I mean, I was listening to ICU's Gaming Daily, and I loved what you said about monetization as a challenge. And you just said, like, even if they're great games, like a lot of games just make monetization feel lame. And like this is not unique to Web3. I think gamers hate nothing more than a lame money grab. So, what's the alternative here? Like if we've all agreed that revenue, cash flow is the thing and we need to monetize these games, how are you making it not lame for players?
I think it's a couple of things. One is we make sure that there's enough room in our game economy. So within Gigaverse, there's a live item economy. We built an embedded marketplace within the game, which, thanks to some of Abstract's tech, actually works in a super seamless manner, right? There's like an embedded wallet called the Abstract Global Wallet. And so if you're shopping for items within our marketplace, it's called the Giga Market, you'll actually find an item, click that you want to buy it, there's one pop-up, one click, and it's done. Also, we made sure from a game design perspective that players, if they want to be playing the trading game within Gigaverse, if they want to be arbitraging, if they want to speculate on which item is going to be more in demand in the future or less in demands in the future, and they want to, switch out their stuff, they're able to do that. So I think like a design principle is important, that like we recognize the trading game is a game that they want to play. We're not looking to take revenue absolutely everywhere. We want to leave enough room for users to play the game, and for some of them to be collecting and hoarding, or others of them, some of these guys are making hundreds of dollars every week because they're pretty smart and like reading the in-game market. The second thing I would say is from a monetization design perspective, there was like a good example is we kind of launched the equivalent of like a VIP subscription, but it's incredibly sort of Web 2 sounding, right? And we've all seen that recent Black Mirror episode where like, on a long enough time span, everything becomes subscription and you can no longer afford the basics, right? So we didn't call it a VIP subscription, and we didn't force people into like really long, like recurring payment plans. We kind of created this, the item in a way that makes sense in our game world, and we called it Giga Juice. And you can buy it for like 7 days, 30 days. Sure, if you want to buy it for longer, you can. But you're not like stuck and roped into like, now we have your credit card, we're going to charge you forever. It's a one-time purchase. And, the take that we have there is like, sure, from a best practice perspective, you want to lock that credit card in. But we'd rather set ourselves the challenge of like actually keeping the game really good and interesting, giving you a reason to come back and buy it again in the future, and not feel like you're like locked into this very Web 2 style VIP subscription, right? So there's like a sweet spot there where we design it in a certain way. Yes, we're generating revenue, but we're not like max extracting or locking people in.
I'll add something that I think is super smart about how Gigaverse did its monetization that we also did at Lowland. So I think that both Gigaverse and Lowland are very smart in pricing their items in USD. So I have a very specific term of what is like a Ponzi versus a non-Ponzi game. A Ponzi game charges for in-game purchases assets priced in its own token, so that token price would go up, meaning that the earlier players would benefit and the later players would lose out, right? And so you've seen a lot of these games. There's been a lot, hundreds, thousands of them in crypto. So when you come in, you have to think about, am I early? Am I too late? Did someone come in on day one and buy 1% of supply, and are they going to dump on me? And, that's a fun little game to play, but most of these games are not sustainable. A lot of the games you see that are really trying to go for sustainable monetization, like Gigaverse, like Lowland, price the items in USD, meaning no matter what the price of any in-game token or what the price of ETH is, you can come in and know that if the thing is $1, it's $1. If the thing is $5, it's $5. I think that's a very underrated piece of monetization design, and I think it should be the standard going forward.
To add to that too, I think like a lot of these projects, when they price things in their token, like if they need to do anything as far as marketing, operations, scaling the business, like they have to sell the token on their core community to fund these things. So like you have investors that want to see the business grow, a company that wants to grow the business, but then has to sell on the investors, and then they complain when the token price goes down, and it just creates this like mess where if you just price your stuff in ETH or USDC, and you can use that cash to buy back token to make the price go up later if you want, but you also don't need to sell the token onto your holders to pay for things like, payroll or whatever.
I actually think that comment around seller pressure on a native token is something that could actually make an entire episode on its own. We might need to unpack that in a future one and get you back to talk about it more. We are nearly at time, guys, but just to round this out, I would love to hear from you guys. What is one thing that you would like to fix or change about the way that people perceive Web3 gaming?
That it can be done correctly, right? That it's not just people being extractive and like, trying to bulk something.
Yeah, I would say almost the same, that it's not a Ponzi. But to add to that, I think that going forward, the rise of acceptance of stable coins like USDC mean that it's not that you're a Web3 gamer that has to think about how do I go to Web2 gamers. I think that the world is actually going to come to Web3 because stable coins are superior financial rails, cross-border, cross-country. Like, one of the problems of game developers or app developers in general taking credit card payments is just how many chargebacks you get for the purchases that for goods you already sold. And we don't have that in crypto. So that means that I don't get a 30% cut on the App Store. I don't have to pay Google and Facebook, and I'm not even getting chargebacks. Like, I don't know why people are suffering over in App Store.
But then also, like, a lot of the onboarding challenges that we had to deal with in Web3, like, they've got like 24 steps for someone just to like download a wallet, get tokens, and like be able to play a game that's going to be largely abstracted with stablecoins and consumer focused change.
And abstract.
Dith, what's the one thing that you would change or fix if you could?
Just to highlight how much is about to change. We've seen at this point a couple generations of Web3 games over time, and there's still so much that hasn't been done. Riffing off what the guys just said, the classic model is you launch a volatile token and that acts as like the game currency. But now it's pretty obvious that teams should be experimenting with stablecoins instead. There's actually like a long list of other stuff I would add there of things that haven't been tried yet that can, it can be like really great experimentation or open up new kinds of experiences. And it can just like continue the progression we've seen where these games get better and better and more interesting and fundamentally mean that this time it will be different. So, we intend to do our part there and lead the way. But I know many other teams are also at this point experimenting and doing really cool stuff too. And so, anyone that played these games in the past, it's time to like kind of recognize that there's a new generation at play here.
Yeah, it's definitely a time of experimentation. I think that's what makes it so exciting. I'm actually excited to hear your shopping list, Dith, of all the things that people could be looking at to play around with. But this has been such an amazing episode. Thanks, guys, for helping us christen the first episode of Lol Lounge. Amazing conversation. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for the very first ever episode of Lol Lounge, a podcast brought to you by YGG Play. We would absolutely freaking love it if you would follow us on socials and check out some of the upcoming episodes.